Welcome back, everyone. So we are now open for question and answers. So if any of our viewers have questions with regard to the presentation that has been just made, you can kindly post your questions. Or if you have any general questions with regard to Bhutan One project, you can also post those. If you have any general comments or suggestions with regard to the Space Forum, the way it is being conducted, you can also share that. You can also post it in the comment section. Okay, so we have one question. The question says, what is communication bandwidth of RF used in Bhutan 1? So Bhutan 1 was operating in UHF frequency, and it was an amateur radio band. And the bandwidth we used, I need to, if I recall it correctly, we were using a very small bandwidth, about 5 kilohertz, 5 to 10 kilohertz. I can relook into that and confirm it later. So we will get directly, or we will post that later at a later date. But just for our viewers' interest, the communication for Bhutan 1 was on amateur frequency band, UHF band, which was 435 megahertz. 435 for uplink and 437 megahertz for downlink. I hope that answers the question for now, and we will get back with the more specific details later. Okay, so we have another comment who seems to have missed the the earlier session and who wants to know the topic of the discussion today. So just to recap briefly on what was presented earlier. So the topic was the onboard computer subsystem of satellite. So basically the onboard computer subsystem it functions as the brain of the satellite, and it communicates with all other subsystems, and it manages the overall functioning of the satellite. So I think the video of the live session will be available in the Bhutan Space Week page. So you can always view the video, and if you have questions at a later stage, you can always post it to us. We will try to answer them accordingly. And while we wait for further questions, just to recall again, the Space Forum is the monthly event organized by the Division of Telecom and Space. So on every 29th of every month, we will have a session. So the first session was held last month, 29th of last month, which also marked the second anniversary on which Bhutan 1 was launched to International Space Station. And today, 29th of July, is the second session of the Space Forum. And the third session will be held on 29th of August. The details of the speaker and the topic of the talk will be shared later. It will be shared via the Bhutan Space Week Facebook page, Instagram, and all other social media pages. So also a brief announcement to all the viewers. Please like and share our Facebook and Instagram pages to get the details about future events and activities that is being conducted by the division and the DITT. So we are still open to questions from the viewers. So while we wait for further questions, I just wanted to share that so 29th of June 2018 was the day on which the satellite was launched on a SpaceX rocket to the International Space Station. But as it reached International Space Station, it didn't start orbiting the Earth on its own. The satellite, the CubeSat Bhutan 1, was then stored in the International Space Station, and only on 10th of August 2018, the astronauts, they manually released the satellites into the orbit, the low Earth orbit, which was around 400 kilometers above Earth's surface. So only from 10th of August 2018, the first satellite of Bhutan, the Bhutan 1, started orbiting the Earth. That was a quick add-on. So if you have any questions, we are still open to further questions. And we will have this session for 10 more minutes. So if you have any more questions, please post it on the comment section. Okay, there seems to be another question. I think I might have overlooked few of the questions. I think there are 3 more questions. So I will start with the question which says the status of, which asks us the status of Bhutan 1. So Bhutan 1 is still orbiting the Earth. So initially the Bhutan 1 was released at around 400 kilometers above Earth's surface, but as of I'll say last week, the altitude of the satellite has dropped down to 330 kilometers, and in next few months we are expecting, we expect the Bhutan 1 satellite CubeSat to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and disintegrate. But as of now, the satellite is still transmitting a strong beacon signal, and the health status of the Bhutan 1 is still showing good sign. And I will now move on to the next question, which says the horizontal position accuracy of GPS used in Bhutan 1. Okay, so that is a very good question. Bhutan 1, uh, we had a GPS chip on board of Bhutan 1 CubeSat, but that chip was sent to space for the first time. So it was sort of a mission for us. We wanted to test whether that GPS chip can function or operate properly in space or not. But unfortunately, the Bhutan 1 satellite, we had some issues with the uh, downlink of the data. And because of that, until now, we are not able to download this GPS data and some few other mission data. And because of that, we cannot say what is the accuracy of the GPS that we had on board of Bhutan 1. So unfortunately, we cannot say much on that, but hopefully there are other satellite missions which is carrying this GPS chip, and maybe in future we will know whether this GPS, how accurate this GPS is, and whether it can function in space or not. Now, I will move on to the next question, which is future plans into space journey for Bhutan. So definitely, Bhutan 1 was the first step for us. So that was the first satellite that we built and launched. It was just a CubeSat, and the primary objective of that project was the capacity building of us engineers. And we we further need further capacity development program. So we are looking into building uh, bigger satellites. As a next step, we are going to build bigger satellites and try to uh, as we learn, as we venture into such capacity development programs, we will also try to incorporate some practical missions henceforth, because for Bhutan being a small nation, we have very limited resource, so we cannot invest a lot in just in capacity development. So as we learn, we will also try to achieve some benefit out of the next satellites that we built. But as of now, we cannot share any detailed information, but we are looking into building more satellites soon. So I hope that answers. And just to ensure that I'm not missing out on any other questions, so I'll move on to next question, which says whether Bhutan 1 can communicate with ISS or not. We do not have that kind of arrangement set in our satellite. So our Bhutan 1 satellite is not designed to communicate with ISS. But ISS, Bhutan 1 operates in an amateur frequency, and ISS also has capability to operate in as amateur frequency bands. So if Bhutan 1 is flying close to ISS, then I believe it is possible for ISS to receive the beacon that is being transmitted by the Bhutan 1 satellite. But as I mentioned earlier, the satellite CubeSat Bhutan 1 is not designed to communicate with ISS. So yeah, there is a revised or the reframed question, but I believe I've answered the question. So just to reiterate again, Bhutan 1 is not designed to communicate with ISS. Okay, so we have another question, which is again very good question. So Bhutan 1 is a CubeSat, and usually in CubeSats, we do not use uh, any uh, specific shielding method. As far as I know, most of the CubeSats, especially the university-built CubeSats, they do not use any form of shielding because the cost of shielding and the method of shielding can lead to much sophistication of the systems itself. But yes, if the components that you have are very critical and if it really requires, if the shielding is really required, then definitely it's something that needs to be explored and used. But coming back to the case of Bhutan 1, we do not have any specific shielding method used for Bhutan 1. But to ensure that the satellite operates properly in the space, so what we did was we chose most of the components based on the ones which has the heritage, one the companies which were previously flown to space and which was successfully operated in space. So most of the components that we had in Bhutan 1 was previously flown to space and was proved successful. And just to add to the previous question, so as I was mentioning, for us, especially for the microcontrollers, it is very important to ensure that they can survive the radiation or in space. So those the components that we use, the MCUs, they are commercially available. So they are not properly radiation hardened as it is manufactured. But to make sure that these microcontrollers can survive in space, what we do is we select a sample of these microcontrollers from a batch of these products manufactured, and then we put them through radiation tests. Uh, these microcontrollers are put through some radiations on Earth in some lab, very controlled laboratory. And if it can survive those tests, then uh, we are more confident that the microcontrollers can survive in space. So that's how we decide whether a component can survive or in the space or not. Okay, so we'll still be live for another 5 minutes. So if you have further questions, you can please post it on the comment section. And like I mentioned earlier, if you have any comments or suggestions or feedback on the space forum sessions that we are conducting, you can also post them so that we can take in your feedback and improve our sessions accordingly. Okay, so we have another question which says, any plan to teach enthusiastic students or give an opportunity to work in space Bhutan in the near future? Okay, that is again a very good question. Uh, so the space science and technology, that is now, we are using the space science and technology as a means to promote STEM education. And definitely, we are trying to engage with students as much as possible. Uh, I think our schools have already incorporated ICT curriculums, and along with it, now DITT is working closely with the Ministry of Education and the Royal Education Council to incorporate into STEM into the existing curriculum, science curriculum, so that the students are more attracted to STEM education. And Accordingly, we will also be conducting some competitions, some outreach programs to engage more meaningfully with the students. And further, we will also be engaging with the RUB so that we also engage with the university students, our students in CST and GENIC, so that they also get experience of working in the space systems. But as mentioned earlier, the space science and technology is just a means to generate further interest in the STEM educations. So just to summarize, yes, we are looking into engaging with students as much as possible and share our experience with them. And yes, they are open to to come up with their own initiatives and create their own future systems. And yeah, you can always follow our page, Bhutan Space Week page, so that you get more information about the future engagements with the students. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. We have another question. Do we have to own space orbit to launch our sat? Okay, that is another good question. Now, we have different orbits, low Earth orbit, medium Earth orbit, geostationary orbit, and also we have other types of orbits like Molniya orbit, highly elliptical orbits. So, and also there are international treaties that has been signed, that has been formed and signed by the UN countries, which says that the outer space is not owned by any particular country. So going by that, we do not need to own an orbit to launch our satellite. But then every country would want to use or launch their own satellite in certain particular orbit, and we cannot launch multiple satellites in the same orbit. So for that reason, before we launch our satellite, there is a specific procedure set out by UN and also the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, because when we launch a satellite, we are using radio frequency to communicate with it. So ITU has a very critical role in ensuring that our communication systems is safe, and also our communication system does not interfere with other existing satellites. So there are many procedures set up by the international organizations. So we have to follow that to ensure that we are not going to interfere with other satellites, or we are not trying to place our satellite in the same orbit with another satellite so that there is a risk of collision. So although we do not need to own a space orbit before we launch a satellite, we need to coordinate with other countries and other organizations to ensure that the satellite that we launch is safe, and also the satellite that is already in space is safe. But there is a special case about the geostationary orbit, which is a special orbit, and the number of satellites that can be placed in that orbit is limited. So in that case, there is again a specific procedures to get sort of a permission to place a satellite in that particular location. Again, that doesn't mean that you own that location. You are just getting international, you are just coordinating with the international agencies and other countries to place your satellite there, so that the satellite that you place there does not harm other satellites, and also your satellite is not harmed by the existing satellites. But in summary, you do not need to own a space orbit, or it would be more appropriate to say that you cannot own an orbit as per the international treaties. Okay, so hope that answers the question. So there is So we will go offline in another minute, and before that there is one question or a suggestion which says if it is possible to show some data or the images captured by Bhutan 1. So as I mentioned earlier, we were not able to download some of the images and other mission data from Bhutan 1. Although from one of the ground station from Kyushu Institute of Technology, they were able to download partial image from the satellite. We were not able to download the full image, but we do have collected the housekeeping data from our satellite, and we have compiled those data. So we will be we can share those data that we have in through our page or maybe in future sessions. So we are almost out of time, and I see one more question. So maybe quickly I can answer that question. How probable is our satellite colliding with other large satellites that orbit below 400 kilometer? So at this point of time, the probability of collision is very minimum. Uh, Although there are thousands of satellites which are operational, or maybe some of them are just a debris, maybe dysfunctional satellites or just a piece of some bigger satellite. But still then, right now, the probability of collision is very low. But as there are more and more satellites being launched, the probability is increasing every time. So that is why there are many international organizations who are taking the issue of space debris quite seriously, and they are trying to address to these issues as soon as possible. So that's why one of the initiative that has been adopted internationally is that uh, such small satellites, any satellite that is being launched in the low Earth orbit, they have to deorbit from space within 25 years. So satellite, even if it becomes dysfunctional after certain years, uh, they should not remain there, because there are cases where a satellite can remain in the orbit even after they become dysfunctional for more than maybe 25, 30, or more than that. So that's why it has been internationally agreed that the satellites that is being launched henceforth, they should deorbit themselves somehow within the 25 years time period. So I think that is the last question for this session, and with that we will close our session for today. So I would like to thank all the viewers who joined us for this session. And just a reminder once again, the next session for the Space Forum will be held on August 29th, 2020. And the further details of this, the next session will be posted in our Bhutan Space Week page. So please stay tuned. Thank you.